if anybody fancies a cupcake. The cupcakes are right here. Yes, sir. That's what I'm talking about. You need to come and... Don't leave him on his own. Don't shame him. Don't cupcake shame him. My God. All right, yes, they've been out for a little bit, but they're certainly not stale. Mike, what do you think? Are they stale? Look at that. Beautiful. Ah, oh, that's what we're talking about. Lovely. Okay, right. Oh, last session of the day in the big house. So, welcome everybody to what I've in my head been referring to. I'm Will. That's Steve Goodman back there. Will and Goody's House of Fun. Last year we had Will and Woody's House of Fun. Woody can't be here this year. He's dead to me. So Goody's stepped up. So well done, Steve. So welcome. This is the fun room. So I expect everybody to laugh and enjoy themselves and generally, contribute. We have Tom Morgan discussing bots and how you only get one chance to make a good impression. Can I get an enormous round of applause and a cheer for Tom Morgan?
Thank you very much. We are a select group, aren't we? So if you've got questions, throw them in the air and just shout out because, otherwise I'll get in my flow and you won't hear. Thanks, Will, for the intro. Yep, good. So let's start with a question. Has anyone here been scammed out of money? Okay, congratulations for putting your hand up. Lots of people would not. It's and it's interesting. So I've been doing some work with the charity recently, and they have just lost a significant amount of money because somebody in a position of authority there was scammed. And the problem we have now is that it's very hard to reclaim that money because this person is finding it hard to admit that they had been scammed. It's a secret. They can't tell us why. It will all be revealed, and they are sure that we will apologize when it's all understood. And this person's willing to risk everything, their reputation, even a criminal conviction, because they don't want to be wrong, and they don't want to admit they were tricked. And that's really powerful, isn't it? People don't like to feel stupid. They really don't. People don't like to feel stupid. And that's kind of what we're talking about today, because we're talking about building bot experiences. And the experience of an application is really important. We know this already. We've known this for years. Like building an application, the layout, the UX, all that stuff is super, super important. But actually, it's just the same for building a bot. And in some ways, it's a bot experience is very simple because it's you having a conversation with a thing. But also, because it's that simple, it is also that hard. Because if you've got an experience like this, and you give this to a user, now, this to a user, a non-technical user, is just as intimidating as this. It's the same thing. You don't know where to go, and people don't like to feel stupid, and this is a massive turnoff. It can be just as scary, just as unfriendly. To make this work really well, your bot needs to be able to do everything. It needs to be able to deal with whatever goes into that window, and that is really, really hard to do. And not only is it really hard to do, there are actually some people that are doing it really well that makes your implementation seem even more rubbish. Example of somebody that does it really well? This has been Google's homepage since they launched, and that was their big differentiator when they launched, up against Yahoo, where you've got pages and pages of things to click on because Yahoo needed to narrow you down into a real niche before they could start to answer your question. Google's was ask us anything and we'll figure it out. Here are two more examples of kind of a bit more modern, and you can argue whether or not they're doing a great job versus an okay job, but you can kind of ask them anything. So there's a lot of competition in that space if you want to do that, and it's really hard. So if we agree that that experience that I showed isn't great, and you need to give and do something better, then you need to give users options on what they need to do. But in order to give users options, then you need to understand what it is you're trying to get them to do and what they want to do. And that means you knowing what they want to do ahead of time. And that means you thinking about the things that they're going to do and how people are going to use your thing and your bot before you actually start. And that is a thing that an awful lot of people don't do. So I used to have an A-level, my A-level computing, so when I was 16, 17, 18, computer science teacher called Mr. Toon, who had printed out on this, like, it was back when it was like fanfold dot matrix printers, above where we used to sit, this massive sign that said, typing is no substitute for thinking. And every time we go something wrong or jump to do something, you just point at the sign and kept pointing at the sign. And I see this a lot in building bots, especially on like the Microsoft stuff, the bot framework, because actually in a way, Microsoft almost make it too easy to get started. You know, they're like, here, take the samples, get started, get building a bot, open the composer, start adding things. And that's really exciting, don't get me wrong, it's really good, but it makes it almost too easy to jump in without thinking about designing, you know, a good UI. So we're going to talk through some of these things, but like, the thinking about what you want, designing it, and before you build it is really important. Technological fit is a really key thing. What I mean by that is a bot the right thing? Is it the right tool for the problem you're solving? I see an awful lot of people like who want to, you know, create a search engine and they want to create a bot, or they don't really know why they want to have a bot, but they want to have a bot. And actually, if you want to just search a whole load of stuff, maybe a search engine's a better tool. Like, it doesn't have to be a bot. And a bot should not be, like, it shouldn't be a bot looking for a solution, right? Make sure that the bot is the right tool. And then outcomes. So outcomes across different systems must be the same. So what do I mean by that? If you've already got an existing way of doing something and you're wrapping a bot around that same thing, the experience, the end outcome to the user must be exactly the same. It's no good if your bot implementation goes down a different path and achieves almost the same thing, but not quite the same thing, because the user experience is way too jarring and you're going to kind of completely put people off. Okay, so things to think about before you start. And I've got these kind of 5 questions that I always go through with people to try and understand what it is they're building and how they're going to build it. So this one is obvious, but it's super important, and lots of people don't think about this ahead of time. And these are things that are worth writing down. So like, literally, what problems am I solving? So, and it can be as simple as this bot is going to do 3 things. And it's going to answer, let's say it's an HR bot, right? It's going to tell you how much holiday you've got. It's going to let you book some holiday, and it's going to answer some questions about policy. Just writing those things down starts to map your problem domain in a way that you can't do. Like, it's easy to do that with like a website or a Windows application or anything like that, because you can start to sort of build up the visual UI. You can't do that in a bot. So you have to start writing these things down and thinking about them. And just as important are mapping out the problems that I'm not going to solve. Because if you think about a particular domain, you will come up with questions that your bot is not going to solve. But you're coming up with those questions because you're thinking about it. When you go and ship your product, your user doesn't know like that you've thought those things through unless you explicitly make them obvious. So by mapping out the things you're not solving, it allows you, when you come to build your bot, to frame the boundaries, if you like, of what you're talking about and where you're going to go with your bot and what it's going to be for your users. Who's the bot for? So this might actually be multiple people, in which case you've got other problems as well. But it's worth thinking through like who is going to be using your thing. So let's come back to our HR bot example. So who's going to be using this bot that you're writing for your organization? Is it going to be a new starter? Is it going to be somebody who's worked in the company for a while? Or is it going to be somebody who works in the HR team and is a complete expert on HR policy and wants a super detailed answer? That might be 3 different bots you just thought about just then. Okay, and if it is 3 different bots, that's fine. Or if you're trying to service that all with one bot, you need to kind of differentiate those answers and how you're going to give them to people. We'll come back to that later. Question 4. So this is time to get really specific about what's happening and how your bot's going to work. And I mean literally write down some questions, like half a dozen, 10, 12, 15 questions that users are going to ask you and you expect your bot to be able to answer. And this is kind of like starting to think about, implementation paths and flows and things like that. But it really helps to really get specific about the types of questions that you expect your users to ask. This is very different from the questions you know your users are going to ask, or questions that your users do ask, but you've got to start somewhere, right? You've got to start with trying to think what, the things that you want your users to ask and the things you want your bot to be able to do. Because once you do that, then you can start to design for how do you get users to ask those things, or use your bot to kind of ask those things. And then character is important, and there's a number of different ways you can do this. There's no right or wrong answers. It can sound like a bot, it can sound like a person, it can sound professional, it can sound chatty. All of that stuff is up to you, but the reason for putting it on here is for you to pick one and stick with it and tell everybody on the team, because if you get multiple people working on a project or a bot, you can get multiple different characters, and as a user, that is super jarring. You started off with this kind of chatty bot, and then you go down one path and suddenly it's like deadpan professionally serious, and you worry if you've offended it, and like it's a jarring experience, right? So and it kind of breaks that kind of mold. So pick a character, but be super consistent about it. Something else to do, and again, we're still just talking before we even start at this point. We're still just designing, basically. But think about a success criteria. A success criteria tells you whether or not it was worth building. So like the thing that you're building, did you build it? Was it worth building? And is it valuable over time? And how are you going to track its value over time? How will you know that you did a good job? And that can be an accuracy thing. It could be based on usage. It could be reduction of usage of another system. So if you're replacing a different way of doing something, like a web page or something, it's a tail off and reduction or support tickets or whatever. Make it specific, make it time bound, and make it something your company cares about. So normally that's money, but it could be happiness, or it could be something else. So as an example, it's right at the bottom, so you might not be able to see it. It will be a successful bot if it successfully answers more than 60% of interactions, used by more than 100 people on average daily, and it reduces help desk tickets by 10% or more. That first bit is for the team. The second bit is for the company. A 10% reduction of help desk tickets, saving of $15,000. Now your company cares. Now when you've done this project and come back to it with all your telemetry, which I'm going to talk about later, this is a successful project. And not only is it a successful project, you use it to fund and to prove the next stage of the process. So what I think is a good idea is to take all of that stuff that we just talked about, to create a bot design document, or whatever you want to call it, but contain the answers to those questions, contain your success criteria, detail your target audience, and be as specific as you can. If it's individual people, that's brilliant. If it's a team or a group, that's good as well. And then any other kind of key stakeholders you've got. Put it all in one place, distribute it to people. You're going to need it later for testing, which I'm going to come back to, but just having all of that is kind of like a plan on a page for building a bot, and it can really help developers, particularly going through different flows, trying to understand, do I try and answer this question, or do I just kind of say, you're outside of the bounds of what the bot can do, like we should stop now. Otherwise your bot kind of, you don't have a hard point, it becomes like tendrils, and your bot tries to do everything and does none of it very well. Right, so we're design done, right? And we're ready to start building. Well, not really. We are sort of ready to start, except that I'm going to make you start somewhere you probably weren't expecting, and you probably don't want to start. So if you're like me, I know what you probably want to do. You probably want to do the golden path, and you want to do that because it's fun and it shows early progress, and it's what we normally do. So the golden path, if you don't know, it's a kind of term in software. There's a path that's golden. It's the first good route through the software that achieves something and does something. If you don't kind of try too many of the edge cases, and you do exactly what the developer told you to do, and you click the buttons in the right order, and you put in the data you're supposed to, then the thing will work. And it's what you normally see if you see a sales demo. And then over time, the edge cases get filled in until you have an actual product. That's called the golden path. It's like the golden route through without any of the badness. And that works really well for web pages. It works really well for desktop apps. It works really badly for bots. And it works really badly for bots because you can't see the golden path in the way that you can with a website or an application. So you can do the golden path, but unless you're the developer or you're really good at explaining things, it's very hard for anyone else to use your bot because you cannot see the path. You can't see. So I think what you should do is start at the other end. Start by thinking about what happens when it goes wrong. Start by thinking about what happens when your bot can't answer the things that you know about. Because there's no visual signposts, for a user, coming to a bot like this is a bit like walking through one of these forests blindfolded. You're back to the command line where you need to know what to type. So instead, start with this assumption that the bot will fail at everything because it's brand new and it doesn't know how to do anything. So start there and then build on edge cases on top of that foundation to actually add on your functionality. So start with the unknown intent. So to kind of channel the Donald Rumsfeld, this is your unknown unknowns. It's not your known unknowns, which are like, I know what you're trying to do, and here's why you can't do it. It is the everything else. It is like, you type something and I have no idea what you're trying to do now. This is like the default experience. Importantly, make this one really good, okay? Spend time making it good. Give users somewhere else to go. Don't make that the end of the journey, okay? Give them the options for the things that they can do next. And also, log everything. Every time a user ends up here, make a note of it somewhere, because this is an important metric that something went a little bit wrong, users ended up here, they're not doing what you wanted them to do, and they're probably not doing what they wanted to do either. So log all of this. I always do this first, and then add extra things on top. Okay, so here's a bad example of one of those. This is a real one. I mean, the mock-up is not real, but like the response is absolutely real. And this is perfect for making a user feel stupid. And as a user, I've turned up in good faith. I've asked the question that I've had. It's a fairly simple question from my perspective, but I don't really know whether the bot cannot do this because it's too complicated a thing to ask, or maybe it can do it and I've just asked it in the wrong way. And I don't know when either of those things are true and it's not obvious which. So this is a terrible example and makes users feel stupid, but is also one of the most common things that you see. This is way better, okay, with just some kind of small changes. Firstly, the user is immediately unblocked. Okay, it's not the best unblocking, but it's something, right? You're not completely dead-ending the user. Like, you're sending them somewhere else, and it can be outside of the bot, and that's okay, but you're trying to get them back onto the rails, okay? You're trying to get them back onto the things that the bot can do. Now, if I was a user that went through this process, I would still be a bit annoyed, because I'd be like, well, I typed that in, and it's the same as that top thing, right? But I'd only be annoyed for a minute, because I'd click that, and then I'd carry on, okay? And it's not great, but it's way better than needing to know you had to type that exact thing, right? So this is better for those reasons, but like, it's presenting users with the things they can do rather than just telling them, you know, the things they can't do. And this is a good way of you defining the scope of your application. This also is a really good way to welcome users as well, which I'll come back to. But like, this kind of defines, you know, the scope of the application. The thing at the bottom is like a bonus thing to do, which is the kind of, I'm trying to do something else that's not in your list. So, you know, what am I supposed to do now? And that is a really good way of getting user feedback. So use that as like a, I can see what you're trying to do, but we can't do it. But I'd quite like to know what it is, because we might do it in the future, okay? This is a good time to catch that from users. You'll get better engagement here than if you send out a survey every 6 months saying, what are the things you'd quite like to do with this bot? People don't remember that stuff. They remember it in the moment of, I just tried to do this and now I can't. I mean, if you're super clever, you don't even need to do this. You could just like do the wording of that button and catch all the things that were typed to make it super slick, but this is quite quick. All right, so we had that question about the holiday where the user had to type, like they literally had to guess the English of like the developer who wrote it. And that's terrible. Try and avoid doing that. Or if you do have to do that, really think through how users are going to ask for things and make sure you nail all the different ways in in which somebody might do something. And if you are going to do that, just be cognizant of where, because this problem gets like multiplied if you've got multiple languages or anything like that. So it's kind of a given, but anywhere you're doing sentence parsing and like stuff like that, use the natural language processing. And I'm saying it because like it's really obvious. Use cognitive services, use NLP. Please don't be looking for keywords in sentences, please, please. And I'm saying it because it's so obvious, but I see it a lot, okay? So, yes, understand cognitive services, do NLP. If you don't want to do any of that, give users options rather than trying to fake an experience where bots understand what the user is saying and then do it really badly. And then take those rails as well, take those common rails and feed them into the chatty words, like the hi, the help, the hey, what can you do? All those things that users say, those are really good opportunities to get your users onto their golden path by giving them the options for the things to do. Okay, so some examples of that. So this is a really, obviously, a bad thing. This is the one from the start, a really bad example, because there's no context, you've no idea what the bot is doing here. This is a much better one, and it's a bit better, in that it's got some clues. It's got some clues in the language about what you might do with this. So if you rocked up thinking you were going to do something else to like fire somebody through it, you'd be like, okay, maybe this is not the bot for me, but here are some things I can do. But still, like, there's guesswork involved in here. Actually, this is the only one where the user doesn't have to guess at how to invoke some specific paths. And the weird thing is that even though this is kind of less common than the others, it's actually easier to do this with options than it is to like NLP it and all the rest of it. Like, make some adaptive cards, give users options. I'm all about giving users options rather than trying to make magical bots when you're planning out the user flow. So I think that's really important, like planning out a good user flow and as much as possible. And if you had limited amount of time, I would say do the options first, bring in the NLP later. Okay. If the bots you're building are on Teams, then don't just build a bot, okay? Because Teams is bigger than just bots. So if you if you need to, if it makes sense, but it probably does, you can make a better experience by bringing in other things. So for instance, bring in the UI, a visual UI in tabs, surfacing your bot in different places like compose channels, compose extensions, which is where your users spend most of the time anyway, and like making it like, posting to channels, making it collaborative and all that kind of stuff. Lean into that if it makes sense for you to do so for Teams. And that very much depends like on what you're building. If you're building a bot that is designed to go across lots of different channels, of which Teams is one of them, that's a harder thing to do because some of that stuff is only in Teams, right? But you might be able to enhance it in Teams where your users are in Teams. But if you're building something that is entirely in Teams, then why not lean into some of the team-specific stuff, like compose extensions, posting to channels, if it makes sense and if it's appropriate, then just post to channels randomly because you can. Again, it's the experience thing. Okay, thinking about bringing some of the information that your bot generates and bringing it to users where they are. Again, if you're in Teams, make use of the fact that bots in Teams can send notifications to users, proactively tell them about things, but do it sparingly. We already have enough notifications in Teams. If you're going to send them, just be aware of them, beware of being a good steward of the notification API, if that makes sense. Because too many notifications becomes noise and users just stop paying attention to you. Okay, so think about making it super personal and relevant and valuable. Think about maybe daily digests and stuff like that. Otherwise, you'll kind of really quickly turn people off. Authentication. So developers don't like authentication much. Yannick was very rude about it this morning. But auth is more than just permissions and more than just like getting to the API that you want to get to. It actually tells you quite a lot about the user and means you can make a super tailored experience. So my example from earlier about not knowing who your user was, are they a new starter? Are they an HR expert? Why not get them to log in and find out for yourself? Because you could do that. you know how Graph works, right? You could find that user and find out how long they've been in the company and whether or not they work in HR. And then from there, you can be like, okay, fine, I'm going to give you a day one answer versus a proper legal answer. And that's a really nice way of doing it, actually, of being able to like differentiate. There's a discussion to be had, maybe, especially if you're building inside an organization, around whether you want to make signing in mandatory or not, or optional, because different people have different thoughts about this. It will be an easier task for you if you make it mandatory, because then you can rely on data you get from Graph. If you make it optional, then you've kind of like doubled your workload in terms of paths, because now you've got to deal with users that aren't logged in and make a decision about, do you ask them how long they've been in the company and do all that stuff, or just give them a generic answer. But it might put some people off having to log in as well. So it is kind of like a discussion. But if you are going to do it, then do SSO wherever you possibly can. So ignore all the other things, go to SSO first. It's not as hard as you think, and it's a much better user experience. If you do it in the Bot Framework Composer, if you want. I've lost my thing. Do it in the Bot Framework Composer if you want. If you use the Bot Framework Composer, it's a good place to start, and it does SSO for you. And it's, yeah, just play with it first and use the tools that are there. Like, don't feel you have to code it all from scratch, because you absolutely don't. Go looking around. Like, there's the Simon Adaptive Card that can really help you go as well. All right, so we've talked quite a bit about building stuff. Let's talk a bit about testing, because nobody does testing, and it's kind of important. So there's a few different types of testing. There's functional testing, which is the testing everyone thinks about first. So let's talk about that first. This is like, does your bot do the thing it's supposed to do? And people don't think to test bots, even though they're applications just like anything else. And so it's kind of important. So you do need to do some testing. The nice thing about it is that because the interface of a bot is quite, it's not visual so much. Like, the nice thing, it's actually pretty easy to do, to unit test it and to mock it up. So you can do quite a lot of testing of bots, like in an automated way. But if you are going to do testing, if you don't have testers, that's fine. Just find people in the company that like breaking things. Every company has one. And what's really important here is to make sure those outcomes are consistent from the design. Look at the things the bot is doing and make sure that they are exactly the same as how they're done elsewhere. And try and get other people that are not developers to weigh in on this, because what's obvious, certainly in terms of conversational flows and how stuff works, what's obvious to developers is very often not obvious to everyone else. Okay, the other type of testing you can do is suitability testing. And this is kind of different from functional testing, which tested, does your bot do what it's supposed to do? Suitability testing is more, is my bot usable by users who, by the real world? So here's what to do. So round one, this is not developers, this is not testers, this is not anybody who's worked on the project. Go and find some people in your target audience, okay, ideally, or some random people out the hallway if not. Get them in a room and give them like a briefing. Go back to that design document I spoke about, take them through the background, take them through the whys, give them some of those sample questions, okay, and then sit them down at the bot and have them use it for a bit and see what happens. Even with all that briefing and all that prompting, you will be amazed at what they type and what comes back and what goes wrong and what doesn't work, okay? Amazed. Try and have developers watching as well, but not in a kind of like sitting next to them going, nope, not like that, nope, not like that, okay? Ideally from afar, screen recording is really good for this, because, like I say, what's obvious to developers is not obvious to other people. Once you've done this one, go and do it all over again with a whole load of different people, but without giving them any briefing. No intros, no explanation, just sit them down in front of the thing and just have them play with it and use it, because that's how most people will come across it. If you're a really switched on company, you will do both of these before you actually write any software at all, okay? You will make a fake bot, you'll stub it up with a whole bunch of responses that doesn't actually do anything, but just give model answers, and then you'll go and find your users and find out if they're actually going to use it or not. So this is a good thing to do if you can convince companies to do it, because it feels like unnecessary work before the dev work starts. Like, all companies want to start like doing dev on day one, And so for you to come in and be like, we're going to do a whole load of design, and then we're going to build something we're going to throw away, and then we're going to give it to some users and tell them they can't have it in 3 months, but they should use it now. But if you can do it, you'll learn loads. And actually, if the users come back and say, we're never using this anyway, it was quite a lot cheaper than writing the thing in the first place. So back in the real world, nobody does testing because there's no budget for it. And then when the project goes late, because the project always goes late, testing always gets cut. So here's what you do. Do what you can before launch if you can with people, whoever you can find. But if you don't get a chance to properly test like that, do a soft launch. So launch it without any announcement, put it live somewhere, normally roughly in the sort of place that people will go for that sort of information anyway. And just what you want to do is just get a small amount of real world traffic. The development team will not like it because they will want a big launch because they have huge and fragile egos, but that's okay. It's much better to do this and annoy a small group of people than it is to annoy everybody. Coming back to the title, you've kind of burnt those people that have a bad experience straight off. Okay, they're gone, they're burnt. It's going to be really hard to get them back to your bot. If you made a big launch announcement and everybody has that, you're never going to get people back to use your bot. If you're in teams, you can use group policy to roll out and to restrict who gets access to your bot, and that works really well. But the really important thing is to use telemetry. Look at the success criteria, look at how people are using your bot, look at the bugs, look at the unknown questions, see what's going on. So after you launch, this is where monitoring continues to be super important because how people use your bot changes over time in a weird way. People try things that they didn't try before. So that whole UX changes. It's almost worse than a regular application, which also becomes brittle over time because the environment changes. With a bot, people change how they interact with the bot. So it's very important to continue to monitor telemetry. You could consider asking users for feedback and suggestions. You can do that inside of the bot. You can do that with a survey. You can do it by doing that unknown intent thing. And then you can also obviously add more features. If you're going to add more features, then be really intentional about adding the things that users want. Put your ego back in the box. And I know that's really hard to do because V2 had all the really cool features that didn't make V1 that you were going to do. But go by the telemetry. And this can be hard, right? Because you started this project because you wanted to make a great interface to your legacy HR system that allowed users to do all this great thing. But your telemetry is telling you that actually all your users want to do is use your bot to answer questions about HR policy. And that can be hard because actually, but you've got to just go where your users are, right? You've got to be led by where your users are and use your telemetry. If you're adding new functionality, make it additive, especially if you've got those rails, because users get really used to clicking without really looking after a while if they use it every day. So if you are going to add new things, add it to the bottom of the list and stuff like that. And then you have to try and tell people about that new functionality. And that can be hard because you need to find the people that tried to do it once before and now don't think it can be done. So you could do a one-time message. So once the thing's there, everybody who logs in after that point gets a hey, did you know sort of message. You can do it like that. If you're building inside an organization, use your telemetry to justify your new feature by showing how many people are falling through to the unknown intent and that we're trying to do the thing that they can't do. And you can tie it again back to spending and all the rest of it. So I've talked a lot about telemetry, and it is super, super important. Have really, really good telemetry. There's a million quotes about measuring and improving and stuff. If you're not measuring, you can't improve. Bot Framework comes with some basic telemetry for App Insights, but it's super easy to add more and add your own, and I would definitely do that. I would kind of add not just technical logging, but almost like business logic logging. Log when an event took place, like at the HR thing, log when an approval happened, like when a user asked for an approval, or those kind of things. It's almost like metric logging. Okay, so you build yourself good metrics that you can use for reporting over time. And if you're a product manager, make it part of the definition of done. Don't have a PBI item for ad logging because it will never happen. Just make it part of every new feature that there's decent logging for when it goes wrong, good metrics for when it goes right, and you're tracking it over time. All right, I'm very cognizant of the free bar. So things to remember, things to take from this session. Do some designing before you build. Don't just jump into the build. If you don't measure, you can't improve stuff. Think about doing that bot design document. Start with the unknown intent. Try and involve real users as much as you possibly can. And then measure, measure, measure. Do the telemetry. If you do all of those things, hopefully you'll build a bot that people will use rather than a bot that people won't use. I hope so. Hope you enjoy the conference. Thanks very much.
Does anybody have any questions for Tom? Many people have got questions for Tom. Exciting.
I need to not remember.
There we go.
Throw it out. Go this way because then I only have to throw a small way.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for the session. It's kind of a stupid question I might ask, but one of the customers that I was talking to, I think 6 months ago, they were using Microsoft Teams platform, but in their organization, AWS was the supported cloud platform. So they said, getting Azure will take a year for security approvals and all that thing that happens. So can we somehow use AWS, use bots in AWS for Microsoft Teams?
So everything I've said applies almost irregardless, without regard to where you're building it. That design principle stuff doesn't really matter where you build it. Can you build bots on AWS? Yeah, you absolutely can. It doesn't have to be bot framework. They have a different set of things like App Insights and stuff like that. But yeah, no, absolutely. Also true for ServiceNow. That's another big place. We see people with the virtual agents and stuff that you can build up in ServiceNow. But a lot of that design stuff is still true and is still relevant. It's not, and I was kind of fell into that a little bit writing the session because I was trying to keep it abstract and not trying to make it super about Microsoft and bot framework and Teams, because actually the design stuff is bigger than that. But also this is a Teams conference. So
yes, sorry, just follow up and I'll pass it over. So what we realized was some of the, for example, app services in Azure, which you're pulling data from, may not be usable for the Azure, let's say AWS bot framework. So we never got to a solution to that problem and ended up suggesting that customer, you need to get the Azure approved. Then you'll have that application developed in your teams and that.
On the Microsoft stack, you can have bot framework talking to a web app. You can have bot framework talking to something in AWS. You could have everything in AWS. It's not bot framework and not web app. You've got options, but yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.
Do you think it's a good idea to add a lot of additional question-answer pairs for just things that people might ask? Does that help a bot, or do you lose focus on what you're trying to do? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, but it depends a little bit on your character. The chattier the bot, the slightly less professional, then maybe. If you go through Q&A Maker, you get this ginormous thing, and you can literally, it tries to be that you can answer everything, and some of the answers are crazy. I actually kind of owe away a little bit from it because it blurs the boundaries of the problem domain. You learn pretty quickly if everything your bot can't do, it comes back with sorry, not talking to you. You got to go down one of these paths. It doesn't become very friendly, but it's much more functional. I think bots should be functional rather than friendly for the most part. But yeah.
So no chit chat.
No chit chat. Sorry.
If I could just interject there, we are starting to run a little bit long on time. So if you've got questions for Tom, can I suggest that you talk to Tom just at the end, if that's all right? In the interim, we have another giveaway, which is a delight. Also, I don't know if you've heard, we've got cupcakes. Feel free to take some cupcakes with you when you go. Right, you all know what you're doing here, swagit.io. Go in there and type in the number 8903. 8903, and we have an Echo Dot, an Amazon Echo Dot.
And you have a 1 in 12 chance of winning.
I can't believe you counted that quickly. I was literally sitting there going, I don't know. Right, is everyone in? No? Oh, Mike, of course not. No, it's going to be someone. That's okay. That cupcake repeating on you yet, is it? Lovely. Awesome. Okay. Anyone not done it that they want to do it? Anyone? No? We're good? Everyone in? Cool. All right. Start the draw.